Hi, I'm Dr. Greg Ellis. With the growth of the low-carb movement, I keep hearing some of the same mistaken beliefs repeated over and over and over again. And I want to keep these mistakes in the forefront of our minds so we don't get caught up in this whole game. Now, some of the big ones are the notion of refined foods versus unrefined foods. The bottom line to this argument is that all carbohydrate-containing foods are digested to glucose or sugar. That glucose then enters into the bloodstream, and it's called blood sugar, obviously. This is the issue where people get really messed up. So there's no difference between refined and unrefined in terms of what they end up as. Then the other major problem we have is the so-called speed by which these different carbohydrate foods leave the digestive tract. And there is the continuing argument that fiber will slow the release of the sugar, thereby avoiding increases in the blood glucose level and in the insulin response to that glucose. Now it goes back to 1981 when the first research paper was published on the glycemic index, which is the idea that different carbohydrate-containing foods impact the level of sugar in the blood. And this has led to the publication of many books recommending the use of the glycemic index to control the release of glucose and control the height of the glucose in the blood, as if it really is important, as if it has any meaningfulness. Well, the point is it doesn't. It doesn't really matter where it rises to. At the end of the day, all that glucose has to be parked away somewhere and used. It doesn't matter how fast it gets into the blood or how high the sugar level runs in the blood. And this is one of the great mythologies. And of course, they were trying to use the glycemic index for diabetics as if to argue that the changes in their glucose levels in the blood would have an impact on their disease. But the point is, it doesn't really matter where the glucose goes. Once it gets above a certain threshold point, and that's not much at all, the threshold point for the way the body handles glucose is certainly occurs before the glycemic index of the lowest glycemic index food is reached. So that does not matter. And what does it have to do? What affects the primary thing in the blood that we want to deal with, and this is going to be your glucose level and your insulin level, and then how they in turn contribute to making fat from glucose. And it turns out that an insulin level that is not much more than what your insulin level is at rest will turn on fat making from carbohydrate. And this, of course, again, is a point that is well below what a carbohydrate-containing food will do to your glucose level. So your fat making from carbohydrate and your fat burning are well turned off. Well, no, not fat making from carb is turned on, and your ability to burn fat is shut down at a very low level of insulin. And this, of course, will occur before we get anywhere near the idea of the glucose between the lowest glucose number and the highest glucose number. So the refining process is irrelevant because it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't do anything. The fiber content in the food does not slow the release of the glucose. This was discovered in the very first research paper. But this is championed by all kinds of people and leads to confusion in the low-carb community. So refining does not matter. Spikes in glucose and insulin do not matter. Everything is set up before these hormones and sugar levels rise. So the spike is of nonsense. And I heard an interview earlier today of Gary Taubes, the author of Why We Get Fat, who was supposedly, according to the interviewer, dropping truth bombs on us. And some of these truth bombs were some of the things that I just said, that fiber slows the rate of the digestion and the release of glucose into the blood, so that fiber is important. Well, that's simply not true. And so we don't get many truth bombs from him because he doesn't understand biochemistry and physiology, because he's not a biochemist or a physiologist. So he continues to promote untruths, and this stuff just floods into the community. We now know that the whole picture of how this low-carb thing is working is opening up. We're getting all the research data we need to show that carbs are really the problem, and fat never was, and cholesterol never was. So keep all these things in mind. I want to just reintroduce this idea to you periodically so I keep it fresh in your head. Okay, I'm Dr. Greg Ellis.